Hello and welcome back to the Undercut podcast. It is time to review the fifth Grand Prix of the year, the Canadian Grand Prix. Is it fifth?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it just still sounds weird.
yeah. It's still wigging me out that we've got to Canada and it's the fifth round. I'm your host Jesse Billington, and joining me once again is none other than Mr. Timo Albus Daly. How are you this warm evening?
Surprisingly recovered. It was obviously a late night last night, a busy day throughout, a busy weekend, let's face it, throughout. Started on Friday, didn't finish until the wee hours of Sunday night and Monday morning. But then I woke up surprisingly intact, which is always good, despite the extreme amount of excitement across pretty much anything you were watching, whether it be F1, Indy 500, F2 was even quite dramatic at points, especially in the feature race. F1 Academy gave us a lot, and of course, there was the pinnacle of motorsport itself, which if you haven't seen, you need to go back and watch. And that was the second running of the Weenie 500. It was pure perfection.
Yeah, unadulterated adrenaline there as they go almost four wide through was it turn three and four in around Indianapolis.
Hmm.
Absolutely incredible racing there. A great precursor actually to the main event really in some ways. Yeah,
Not the foreshadowing we were expecting for the Indy
yeah,
500, but we will take it.
yeah. Alton Park as well, BTCC was a bit of a scorcher as well this weekend.
Mm.
And we had two Hamiltons on the podiums this weekend. Obviously, Lewis in Canada and his brother Nicholas at Alton Park with the Jack Sears Trophy. So, yeah, just one of those all-round weekends where you go, damn, aren't we lucky to be motorsport fans? Um, and now, Plunk, significant change of gear as we touch on a little bit of news. And obviously, this happened after we'd recorded the preview to the Canadian Grand Prix. This was, of course, the sad passing of Kyle Busch. So he sort of won the weekend before, and then he had essentially a head cold that developed into pneumonia, sepsis, and unfortunately passed away. I think it was while testing sort of one of the driver in loop systems, as far as I can tell, sort of in sort of the Chevrolet Technical Center in North Carolina. Shipped straight off to hospital, and yeah, passed away unfortunately on the 23rd of May. So
Yeah,
yeah,
very
it,
sudden, like you say. Just, racing maybe a Sunday, what, 3 or 4 days before, and did, pretty decently by average standards. In your NASCAR, you can switch on a dime how quick your fortunes will go there from being leading to being P20. So if you can finish around 10, 15th, you're happy. And then obviously a couple of days before that, won the truck race in the Craftsman Series. So very quick turn of events, very sad, and everyone was understandably shocked. And we saw seemingly endless tributes, which haven't finished yet either, and I don't think will do anytime soon throughout the following days, and will continue, I'm sure.
yeah, I think the tribute to the astonishing thing is the fact that it was so broad-reaching across motorsport. Obviously, NASCAR, IndyCar, the big American series really reacted to this, but also Formula One was sort of like knocked by this as well. I think it was it helps they were on sort of North American soil at the time, but it's just one of those things that makes you realize just how big of a career this guy had had. And equally, obviously, the terrible timing of it in the build up to the Coca-Cola 600, there's a lot of NASCAR drivers, and with the Indy 500 as well, a lot of IndyCar drivers doing sort of fan meets and interactions and activations around sort of the country. And a lot of them sort of stepped away from it for a moment to take a phone call. And a lot of people online were reporting that, yeah, halfway through, like our driver just sort of like upped and left, came back, and just seemed incredibly unhappy with the fact that he was now here. And then realized that he had taken the unfortunate phone
News
call
starts
that
trickling then, yeah.
yeah, one of their best friends has just passed away. I mean, there was an absolutely brilliant tribute from I can't remember which one of the NASCAR drivers it was, but it was talking about the banquet they'd all had in Las Vegas, and then had like a sort of big presser the next day, and just reminiscing of this sort of great story of sort of standing in the press conference room with a very hungover Kyle Busch just laid out on the floor using a curtain as a blanket, and NASCAR dug out the footage and the photos from it, and it's one of those moments where you go, this guy was a huge character on the motor racing scene, and it makes sense. 2015 and 19 NASCAR Cup Series champion, 18 and 19 regular race winner through those series as well. Where would we get to? Yeah, so and then on top of that, you've got the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series 2009, you've got the Craftsman Truck Series 2008 and 2010. He could turn his hand to most types of sort of like oval and stock car racing and was absolutely phenomenal in them. And yeah, the hole he's left in NASCAR in truck racing is going to be huge because he was just one of those characters that filled the space he inhabited, and the racing world is going to be worse off without him here.
think it's one of those things as well where, you get into motorsport. If something happens while you're driving, while you're racing, that's one thing because it's that shared acceptability of there is a risk every time you get in the car. And not that it makes it less sad when the worst happens in that circumstance, but it's sort of an agreed upon thing that we don't talk about
Mm,
until something bad happens. But even then, it's kind of, if you were going to go, at least you're going out kind of on your own terms in the way that you would want to if you had to choose a way. Whereas when it's something, you think back to when Michael had a skiing accident and you go, how have you managed to have a career such as that of all the times that it could have gone wrong for you in a situation where you, statistically probably more likely would have. And then it's a skiing thing that gets you, or in this case, it's a very sudden illness that just gets you instead. And I think that's what makes it in this instance that much more wide reaching because it wasn't some big fiery crash or anything like that. It was just there 1 minute, gone the next.
yeah, just one of those shocking things, and obviously he leaves behind a young family as well. He's got his son
Mm.
racing karts and all sorts at the moment, getting him in sort of following his roots. And it was a small clip that came out from NASCAR at the weekend at the 600. There was also Kyle Larson's family there as well. One of Kyle Larson's sons saw Bush's son sort of stood there in the crowd and came over and just sort of gave him a hug, and you sort of look at it and go, okay, next generation's all right. I think the kids are doing all right here, but it's one of those sort of family names. This is like the first NASCAR race we've had in something like 30 years that's not had a Petty or a Busch in it as well as the thing. They have been two of the foremost families when it comes to stock car racing, and yeah, it's the first time in quite a while we had the missing man formation on the pace lap, a moment of silence on lap 8. It's one of those moments that, yeah,
Mm.
shocks you. And yeah, even his teammate then went on to win the race, and yeah, got the chance to dedicate that win to him. So it's yeah,
Regardless of who would have won on that occasion, the win would have always been dedicated in that instance. But there's something very fitting about the teammate getting to do that. You always think about what gives a driver with extra speed
yeah,
in certain races. Is it the home court advantage? Is it the fact that it's your last race, or is it in this circumstance you've got something to race for that you I'm glad you don't always have, but when
yeah,
you get it, you make sure that you use it accordingly. We saw this in F1. The thing that comes to mind immediately was when Chadwick Boseman passed away in, what was it, 2020, and then Lewis just seemed extra Lewis at Spa on a particular weekend and dedicated his win on that occasion. So it's interesting how that impacts the driver and what they're capable of.
yeah. Really, really strong win for Daniel Suarez in the number 7 car. But anyway, with that sort of, well, again, clunk gear shift
There's no
again.
natural segue.
There's no easy way to segue into it. Obviously, we've mentioned it was a busy weekend of motorsports. I feel we ought to touch on the Indy 500, 200 laps around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It was only one lap that really mattered. And God, I'm heartbroken from that one. As much as I'm so happy for Felix Rosenqvist made an Indy 500 win in incredible style. God, there were so many other drivers that were really in contention until the last 40 seconds of that one.
Not even just the gap between first and second, but if you saw the gap separating third,
The
fourth, and
second row
fifth,
come through. Yeah.
it's nothing, absolutely nothing. And to go, we've had 500 miles of racing, 200 laps, two red flags, however many cautions, and it all comes down to less than the time than it takes to blink your eyelids, essentially, to just decide the top 5 spots. It's just incredible.
Yeah. Second year on the bounce that David Malukas has come home second best as well. At
He's
least
giving
last,
Pato Award a run for his money in terms of being the
yeah.
sad runner-up.
Yeah, last year it was sort of luck and happenstance that found him in that sort of top running spot as a rookie. This year it meant something different. He's running with Penske. He's got that big drive behind him, and you could just see that it took the wind out of his sails after it this time. And
Understandably.
yeah, it looked like it could have gone any way towards the end there. I mean, it even looked like at one
Marcus
point,
Armstrong had it for a second.
just
Hello, he was there.
like that.
Bailey was up there. 14 different leaders over the course of the 200 laps. 70 lead changes in total, the most in history. It just, yeah, it was one for the ages.
Yeah, comes down to the closest finish in the sport's history, and this is the
Yeah,
100
on
time
top of that
win.
as well.
Yeah, point oh
Point 233 of a second.
0.0233. So not
Yeah,
even a
point oh
tenth,
two
a
three three three.
two
Less
hundred.
than a tenth of a second.
Yeah, and covering the top two guys, and then like you said, it was like 3, 4, and 5 come through
With
incredibly close.
0.0155 of a second, I think, for them as well. It really was a photo finish. It was a case of, I'm not sure, you're either third, fourth, or fifth. Let us get back to you on that one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I ouch. I don't want to talk about it because the idea of sad David Malukas makes me sad. But so we'll move on to what we're
But if
actually
you want to hear more about it, On the Curbs IndyCar, that'll be out later in the week. Go and listen to that instead.
when I'm emotionally strong enough, I'll put that on. Flip side of that, Formula One Academy, though, we had the inverse of some close photo finishes. Instead, we had some absolute,
New records broken.
yeah, from
Alicia Palmowski, she beat Maya Wood's previous record of most dominant win. I think Wood had the record of about 7 seconds. She beat that in the first race to 10 seconds and then beat it again in the third race by just under 11 seconds
in the
in the
wet.
wet.
Yeah,
So she put on some statement drives this weekend. And F2 was just F2. They just smashed into each other all weekend long and just decided we're not going to bother trying to break any records. We're just here to have fun. And I'm all right with that. I'm all
yeah.
right with that.
First time going to Canada. I would love to
Wall of
talk
Champions
about that.
smacked.
Yeah, there was some impressive collisions there. Almost as good as Kyle Collette's collision into the wall at Indy, which blew half the
Hmm.
side of his car off. And yeah,
He went from
um,
leading the race to that. Poor guy.
yeah. But yeah, Formula Two, great. Formula One Academy, absolutely bonkers this weekend. And then Formula One. Um, I don't think there's actually a lot.
Also got in on the action.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to take a very long time to go through because surprisingly a lot happened, or rather it won't because so many cars didn't finish. There's not actually that much to talk about. But
Well,
um,
the most impressive thing for me wasn't the fact that so many cars didn't finish. It was the fact that every
what?
two and including Isaac Hadjar in a Red Bull in P5 was lapped at least once. Bottas, by contrast, on the other end scale, lapped 4 times. And if the graphic was to be believed, and considering the driver involved, it's believable. I think 14th place, Lance Stroll in 15th place. So it was incredible how that happened. We've not seen that amount of lapping for quite some time. And you think, oh, you must have just had a boring runaway race with that one. No, no, we had a lot going on. So I'm not
Yeah,
entirely sure how they managed it.
yeah, Bottas down 4 laps, Stroll down 4 laps, Ocon, Bortoleto, Hulkenberg, and Piastri down two, Behrman, Sainz, Gasly, Lawson, Colapinto, and Hadjar down one, and Charles Leclerc not exactly close, still 44 seconds off that lead. So don't know what he was doing this weekend either. Not he said in qualifying it's either going to be P8 or the wall, and he somehow lucked into P4 this weekend. But we'll get to that in due course. So we'll kick off at the top of the constructor standings. I haven't reordered these yet, but Mercedes still leads after, certainly for the first half of the Grand Prix, what looked to be fantastically dominant racing, despite the fact that they were going tit for tat all the way through. Antonelli and Russell were just drawing out a lead over the sort of the rest of the pack. It was frightening, really. It did give the idea for the title for this week's episode to be Welcome Back 2016. Close enough.
Yeah, you say 2016. I was thinking 2014 Bahrain. I was thinking 2022, also Bahrain, but with different drivers. And then even the start of this year, you saw the yo-yoing with Leclerc and Russell. And you got more of that, but in a really nice, fun way. It was on the edge, but clean. I think Antonelli had a lot of things to say on the team radio across the weekend, none of which I think did him any favors. You might be doing very well at the moment, but I think in some ways he got lucky that Russell Card conked out on him because if I had to put money on which of those two drivers were going to come out this weekend on top, it would have been Russell. He looked like we were hoping he would look in Miami after that break and going, I need to do something here now. And he did nothing wrong all weekend. He just kept putting in performance. And it showed with the energy with which he threw his headrest out of the car. That's not a driver who's happy about what's just happened or is to to blame for what happened either. It was just a very rare power unit failure from Mercedes, which they be wanting to look into. I mean, not a great weekend overall for Mercedes powered cars across the spectrum. Admittedly, not for incredibly technical reasons for everyone looking at Albon, but you know, it's something they're going to want to look at for certain because that's not something they're going to want to risk moving forwards. That scrap, yeah, we need more of that moving forwards. I don't know how you do that in Monaco, but I'm up for it. And also, maybe it goes back to what you were saying about not many cars finishing.
Yeah, if we have that level of scrapping at Monaco, there's going to be scrappage by the end of it. I
We
think
see what happens when there isn't scrappage in Monaco. So if we do get scrappage,
there'll just be a big pile of scrappage cars, I think, at the end of it. But it's, yeah, I think what Mercedes allowing them to race seems dicey, but I think both the drivers understand what they mean by that. They never seem to be particularly happy about it on the radio, but they always come away from it afterwards, sort of with a good understanding of just how far they can push one another. And I think that provides for great entertainment for the fans and for the broader enjoyment of the racing. I think this was one of the best races we've had all season long, regardless of the fact that it was changeable conditions, a lot of retirements. The racing seemed a lot more genuine. You had to make that send on the brakes going
not just
into
with Mercedes
yeah,
throughout the pack.
yeah, you had to be ready to make that send into the final chicane. You had to set it up going into the hairpin. This wasn't just a case of you get on the straight, you press the button, you drive past. It's gone, the tweaks have sort of settled in, embedded in, and the drivers are getting better at the energy management, meaning that it's now becoming a chassis and driver race once more, which I think is what we want to see. So if they advance it a bit further, give the rest of the drivers time to learn it and get used to that sort of power deployment and management, it's going to go back to being sort of a really good sort of drivers race. And I'm looking forward to that. And I think
It's
if
it's 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 the racing we were lacking last year, right? We had one team that was clearly out in front, but you never really felt like there was a battle going on. You know, the closest we ever got, it feels like was amusingly Canada, which was too close.
yes,
But the rest of the year, it was just, oh, Norris has won or Piastri's won. There was never this. We never really got that. And I feel like if we are, I don't think we are here yet, but if we are at a point where it is just Mercedes at the front for the driver's title, at least with this potential, we can see that, yeah, it's not going to be a case of one driver's dominant and then the other is. It's going to be a case of they're going to beat two shades of shit out of each other every single race weekend. And that is what we are here for. We want the aggressiveness of those Wienermobiles on that second lap in the Weenie 500 with Mercedes every single time. That's all we ask for.
yeah. And there were a couple of moments where you really saw the difference in the experience between the two drivers as well. There are a couple
Mm.
of moments where
Russell very calm in
yeah,
comparison to Antonelli.
didn't decide to defend fresh air and sort of make sort of a couple of moves in braking zones and bits, whereas Kimi was a bit more sort of scrappy with it. And but it's
You could tell that Russell was teammates with Hamilton and he's learned a thing or two. Whereas
yeah.
Kimi, he's never had that. He's learning that now,
Mm.
and he might not like the fact that he's having to learn.
Yeah, this is a championship that's not only going to be raced on track, but raced in the classroom. It's going to be a case of what comes sooner, the end of the season or Kimi Antonelli learning how to comprehensively beat George Russell. And I say that like he isn't doing that already, but bear in mind that two of the
It's
races
not
where
felt in a straight on straight fight. It's
yeah,
more like we were saying earlier. It's like it was last year. It's Kimi just buggers off into the distance.
mm.
Russell's not there.
And
We've
also
not had it yet.
a lot of the times where we've seen Kimi sort of seemingly storm off into the distance from Russell floundering, Russell's either had power unit issues, which he had in China, which struggled with his fight back there,
Mm,
and also this weekend, obviously, he had a retirement that wasn't his fault. It's not like he
mhm.
binned it trying to like defend
No.
against Kimi. So certainly two of the sort of four races we've seen Kimi dominate haven't been because Russell's fumbled it. There's been external factors. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it progresses from here. Kimi was really ecstatic. He got his race start nailed on Sunday in those slightly weird, greasy,
So
semi-damp.
the one time it didn't matter as much
Yeah.
because
Uh,
Russell was also there to nail it with him.
yeah, but if Kimi's now starting to get more and more competent and put together, those times where luck goes against George Russell are going to be even more impactful on the season standings. And it's sort of to quote the Martin Brundleism, if he didn't have bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. It's very
Mm.
much that scenario where fate is not being kind to George at the moment. But I don't think that should detract from his racecraft and his ability across each weekend. And understandably, he was irate, and you see him toss the seatbelt buckle, you see him throw the headrest and storm out, and it's gloves on the floor, like proper sort of comedy of errors, like blast, I can't believe this has happened to me.
We've also seen this last year as well, bad luck for one driver in the first half of the season, how that changes after the summer break. So even if George is having this bad luck now, we could see that happening to Antonelli post summer, and it all kind of comes back and equals out a little bit in the end. It's as much the driving gods as it is the drivers, and it all sort of adds up eventually. So I don't think we're anywhere near done yet.
Yeah, equally, if you believe in the Kimi Antonelli titanium dioxide conspiracy theory, where he only does races where you can have titanium dioxide as a food additive, we're going into the European leg where that is not a legal food additive anymore. So,
And he didn't do well in comparison to the rest of the season in Europe last year either. So
look, all I'm saying is the maths is mathing when it comes to this conspiracy theory. It's one of the few that I will believe. Um, don't guess as to which other ones I do. But anyway, with Mercedes out the way, Ferrari does hold on to second place. Hamilton qualifies fifth, finishes the Grand Prix in second place, a well-earned race for him. And Leclerc qualifies eighth and finishes fourth. Quite happy there too.
yeah, Hamilton looks so happy at the moment in that Ferrari. He turns up on the Thursday, Friday, squashes immediately all of the comments about him retiring and says, "You get used to me being here because I'm not going anywhere anytime soon." Then does decently in the sprint, qualifies fifth, outqualifies Leclerc, fights Verstappen, and doesn't fall into any 2021 style traps, dispatches him with relative ease in the end once he's figured out what to do and catches Verstappen a bit unawares, which is a very rare thing to see indeed, and then finishes second before leaving. You just gotta love it. And Leclerc as well, he capitalizes on McLaren's woes, has a bit of an anonymous race, but considering that he still manages to finish in fourth, I don't think he minds too much, to be honest, and is one of four cars not to be lapped. That's good.
Yeah, it's good going from Leclerc, and I think again it keeps him close to that fight. It's enough to keep him in certainly early title contention, but also just within touching distance of the top three of drivers. That's where he sits at the
Mm.
moment, which is pretty tidy. And yeah, I think he's Ferrari worked out what they've done with the car last weekend. They've come to a rather more conventional racing circuit, all things considered, and been able to further develop that. And I think that's a positive sign all round. They've been able to sort of make the changes they've needed with that car. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what this revitalized Ferrari can do because there's
I mean, it wasn't bad. That's the thing. It was just Mercedes were good and very good, and Ferrari just needed that extra something. And they still maybe are lacking that extra something because Mercedes still buggered up the road, and they couldn't really do much to catch them. And you do wonder if Hamilton, sorry, had not had his little off moment when he was chasing Verstappen down the first time, if he would have been able to do anything about Antonelli. We don't know.
yeah,
But when you have a circuit where it's trickier to get ahead in some respects, you look at the next few coming up. Monaco, obviously, tricky for a number of reasons. Spain, if we want 2016, Mercedes won't be worried about too much there because they won't. And then Austria, you're going to be constantly in traffic, even if you are sparking up the road. It's just such a small circuit. And then you get to Silverstone, which always throws something into the mix that you can't comprehend with. It's a little bit like Indianapolis in that way with Helio Castro-Neves's theory about the track chooses the winner. Silverstone feels like F1's closest equivalent to that in some ways.
yeah,
Um, because of results we've just seen for many, many
yeah,
years be just
yeah.
something, it's always the one that throws up something different. Uh, so what Ferrari can do now, I'm not sure, but it's nice to see that even though Mercedes have made a step, Ferrari have not made a step back, and they might not be with them, but they're like Leclerc, touching distance.
Mm. Like when you look at British Grand Prix winners, certainly 2019 onwards, the theory of a circuit picking its winner is very true.
Mm.
19 Hamilton, 20 Hamilton, 21 in that big title fight, Hamilton, 22 Sainz settling in at Ferrari, the new regulations, that really exciting race with the sort of awkward start to it and the crash and everything. 23 Verstappen on one of his most dominant years ever. 24 out of nowhere, Lewis Hamilton. 25 as the car comes good, it's Lando Norris. There's the Lando stand. There's all that hype around it. 26 lines itself up to be kind of a funky one for the British Grand Prix coming up. And I think that Ferrari, they stand in a good place to capitalize on whatever goes wrong ahead of them. And if you look at the performance
Mm.
of McLaren's this weekend, where they should have outrightly sort of beaten Ferrari, they didn't. And Ferrari again were running clean and tidy and in the right place to capitalize on it. You look at where they were. If something went wrong for Mercedes, they were making up those places. So
I'd
there's
say
nothing.
they'd be first and third
Yeah,
if you looked at that for both of them, and that's not a bad place to be to capitalize on.
yeah, when you consider sort of what Ferrari have done and how reliably they're running, there's nothing sparkling about it, but it's that sort of like ferocious consistency that makes it really tricky to overhaul them when it comes to the points. And I've got the spreadsheet open on the next tab. Hang on, I can tell you because while Mercedes 219, Ferrari are 147, that's just over a race win, two race wins away from them. But then McLaren are on 106, and the gaps just start increasing and increasing the further down
Mm.
you go. It's such a broad spread at the moment. Red Bull 57, and then
It's
with
only round five, like you say earlier, to have that kind of a gap so early is brilliant for Ferrari to go, right, Mercedes are going to be tricky, but at least we don't have to worry too much about
about what's
those
behind
behind
it.
if we just keep knocking in these consistent performances.
Yeah, and that looks great on track. That's a great way to keep fans to build confidence in the drivers. Also, give you the chance to be quite developmental. Ferrari have been trialing a lot of new things this season, and that's not something Ferrari usually does. They aren't usually the ones that come out with the big developments or the big technological advances. They're usually very much on the back foot or just sort of gently copycatting. But this season, it feels like they've really pushed their technical
You wonder
department.
how much of that is Lewis as well, trying to get more of his way.
Yeah, but I think that's a good thing. That's no complaint. I think it's
Mm.
good to see
Oh,
this.
it's oh no, it's good. It's just
Yeah,
it's interesting to have that observation. Go, what's different this year that
yeah.
you've not had in previous years? And go, son of a bitch.
Yeah, it is the Hamilton effect. It's the way that they seem driven to try a few new avenues this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops. And in changeable conditions, it seems that the pit wall was able to respond. And while it's still a bit Ferrari-ish at times, they do listen, they do adjust, they are getting better. And every weekend, Ferrari is getting better. And I think that's the thing that's going to really terrify McLaren and Red Bull, because while McLaren might be able to bring a really good car, Ferrari have just got this sort of pressure on them. McLaren this weekend, Piastri qualifies fourth, Norris third. Piastri has all manner of side quests and whirlwind adventures through the Grand Prix and somehow finishes 11th. Norris, meanwhile, DNFs after I think it sounded like he stripped an input or output shaft on his gearbox. All
Mm.
engine power, no drive.
Just a mess from start to finish. The choice of tyre at the start was just so obviously questionable, and both drivers going, "What are we doing here?" And McLaren just go, "That's all right." And you go, "You've done nothing from the past two seasons, have you?" When it comes to listening to your drivers and just managing the cars, and it was quite interesting. I don't want to say that Zach Brown is the key to their success because I'm just not comfortable saying that. But it's interesting how different that team operates when he isn't trackside. He was obviously in Indianapolis this weekend, and I think I can't remember the last race he wasn't there, but I do remember it not being particularly good. I think for McLaren on that occasion, and you just go, guys, you got to learn how to cope without him. He's there in a largely ceremonial role a lot of the time because he's delegated the work to a lot of other people, and he's just so he can take care of all of like the media side of things, so that you guys can get on with the car and the details. So him not being here shouldn't be that much of an issue, but it just unravelled for them. And yeah, Piastri was lucky to get 11th. Norris, even when he wasn't, busy DNFing, wasn't exactly having a great time. He was moving up through the order quickly, but then mistakes would happen. And yeah, just a mess from start to finish. And what do you say? What do you say? It's you wouldn't believe, you look at maybe it's an unfair snapshot, but you take a snapshot from random points in time across a season, and then you compare it to another one. And you look at this weekend and go, that's the world champion, that's the defending constructors champion. And you go, how? How
Yeah,
did they manage to do that consistently well over an entire season to do that when they managed to do such fundamental errors here? At a
yeah.
race circuit that isn't new. They've got lots of history on, lots of success on in the past, and yeah, it's mind-boggling.
It neither one of the drivers looked up to pace this weekend, which, considering they qualified third and fourth, is terrifying
Hmm.
for one. But then in the Grand Prix, neither one of them actually seemed to be sort of with it. There was a lot of clumsy errors creeping in for both drivers, locking in front and rear axles. There was obviously that huge crash between Piastri and Albon that just sort of ripped apart Albon's side pod and sent Piastri scarpering for a new nose in the pits. And yeah, I don't know what it is. I think there's that car struggles a little bit once it gets into traffic, and certainly slower, heavier traffic. It doesn't quite have the outright pace to come back through. I think if it had been a drier, more conventional race around a broader racing circuit, they might have found, or certainly one with a lot more higher speed corners, which is where
Are
the
you
McLaren
saying if the
strong.
circumstances were completely different, it would have gone better for them?
Yeah, under different circumstances, we've had a different outcome. But no, what I'm saying is that this was not a circuit that favored the McLaren. The McLaren has always been a car that really revels in high speed corners where it can build its speed up and keep it flowing. You look at that flowing sections around China, around Albert Park, it's a lot less stop starty. Whereas Canada, you've got those heavy braking zones, the chicanes, the hairpin. Those are clumsy corners for the McLaren. And we've said this about their car design in the years gone by as well. The two previous years where they've been fighting for the Constructors' Championships and won both of them, they've still struggled on circuits where it was those big, heavy braking zones. And the fact that Charles Leclerc was able to keep Oscar Piastri so honest around Baku was because the McLaren does not like big braking zones into a tight turn and powering out of it again. There's something about the way they set up a rear end, a gearbox, and a braking system that just doesn't gel with it. And I think Canada compounded a lot of issues for them and has drawn a highlight to the fact that this is still a compromised chassis. This is still also drivers that can't drive around problems. We often hail Max Verstappen for the fact that he can drive around an issue, in much the same way that George Russell was able to get a lot out of a terrible Mercedes because he spent so long at Williams because he learned to drive around issues. Piastri and Norris can't do that. When something starts to go wrong, everything goes wrong. They haven't got that breadth as a driver to be able to combat it and find another way. It's just send it and see,
Which is
unfortunately.
really intriguing because, Piastri, you could forgive him slightly for it just because less experience overall.
Yeah,
Um, but Norris it's very telling because he's been there best part of a decade now.
yeah.
And yeah, you, it, that's all I'll say. I think
Yeah,
you can draw your own conclusions.
yeah, when you look at the way that some of the other two drivers that joined him in that cohort, i.e. Albon and Russell, while they've had very different career
Mm.
pathways, when it comes to dealing with problems, dealing with an issue, getting pace out of a car that's a little bit recalcitrant, Russell is by far and away in a different league, but Albon is pretty good at like nursing home a
Even
terrible car.
Leclerc to an extent with
Yeah,
Ferrari, even when it wasn't going great, he still managed to pull some decent results out of it enough of the time.
yeah, he was always getting it into the
You
top
look at the
10.
Ferrari in what was it, 2020? That was a terrible Mercedes. Terrible Mercedes,
Terrible start
terrible,
to the year.
brilliant Mercedes, terrible Ferrari. But, it still wasn't, it's kind of like when you say, oh, Hamilton's doing terribly and he's still, fourth overall. He's still not outside of the top 10 overall in the championship. It's still pretty good in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts McLaren moving forward. Because even if you have a strong car, you need the driver to go with that. And Silverstone in 24, perfect example of that. They
Yeah,
learned the next year, but it was just interesting to see how that all develops.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, you draw Charles into it. I've got his 2020 season in front of me. Um, Only three times out of all the races that year does he finish outside the top 10 when he finishes. He either retires at the Italian Grand Prix, which was mechanical failure, I remember off the top of my head. The Spanish Grand Prix was also mechanical failure. I can't remember what happened at the Styrian Grand Prix. I think that was it. He got crashed into his teammate, wasn't it? He and Seb came together at the second last
yes,
Grand Prix. Hungary, he finishes 11th. Belgium, he finishes 14th because the car just had no pace because they'd told them to turn the engines down. Sakir, he retires, and Abu Dhabi, he finishes 13th. Every other time, he's in the top 10 and earning points. So Charles Leclerc is, like I said, is like you sort of suggested,
hmm.
is one of those drivers that can drive around a problem. But Lando Norris, as soon as there is a problem, everything else starts crumbling as well. And I think that's really telling in that both McLaren have a limit as to what they can design their car to, or haven't covered all the bases as an engineering team, but also there's a hole in their driver lineup. And that's where Ferrari is going to be really strong. While they might not have the car to beat them, they've got the two drivers that will. And that's,
They've got a driver who's been learning for a very long, the best part of a decade, how to deal with Ferrari in itself, and you've got a seven-time world
like, world
champion who
champion.
probably knows a thing or two.
that makes up the huge difference. And I think it's going to be really interesting. I think we can, it's almost a foregone conclusion that unless something major changes, Mercedes are going to really run away with this. So it's going to be that battle between Ferrari and McLaren in second place. That's going to be a really interesting one to see over the season. It's going to be times where you get a circuit that doesn't favor the McLaren that I think we see Ferrari hugely dominate them. The rest of the time, it's going to be a lot closer. And that's going to be really exciting. Meanwhile, Red Bull Racing. Verstappen qualifies sixth, finishes third. Hadjar, really good weekend for him. Qualifies seventh, just behind his teammate, at times looking like he was going to out-qualify Verstappen, and finishes fifth, one of his best results to date.
Yeah, easily the team's strongest weekend so far this season. Verstappen, his first podium of the season,
It's taken
which
12
is
rounds.
it's that weird. Yeah, 5 rounds, but here we go. We're in late May, nearly June. But Canada. When you say talk about Canada to get a podium for Verstappen, just sounds wrong on so many levels, regardless of what round number it is. And he was on track for second, but Lewis is Lewis, and he's not going to let that go. And I think Verstappen was just grateful to A, get to the end of a Grand Prix, and B, then get on a podium. He's having a tricky year. It's obviously probably his best race in anything, actually, quite frankly, this year so far. Um, and Hadjar, you were saying about the comedic potential earlier, but he was there with some brilliant comedic potential. He got so many penalties in this Grand Prix, and yet they made zero difference because of the almighty gap he had back to Colapinto in sixth. He went in, I think, for two stop and go penalties, and he still came out at the end of the second of those and had 15 seconds to spare on Colapinto. It was insane. And ordinarily last year you'd say that you go, oh, it's not too surprising. It's Colapinto and it's an Alpine, but that Alpine isn't half bad this year. So the fact that he was able to do that whilst also having been lapped by Antonelli, probably because he was in the pits for about 67 years, is just marvelous. It's kind of the stupid motorsport thing you love to see of I don't know how you've managed to do that. You've been lapped. You have a 15-second gap to the guy behind you, which it was over a minute, but you got penalties for XYZ things while your teammate is just off down the road for about 5 hours battling away with Lewis Hamilton, rehashing 2021 in a nice, more comfortable setting for third.
Yeah.
Red Bull, I don't know if they're back, but they're at least moving in the right direction, and it's weird to be kind of buying for them to do well.
And I think if Red Bull keep this sort of little bit of progress up, they can start to challenge McLaren from the other side of them on the
Hmm.
constructors. That's going to be really interesting watching McLaren have to fight a battle on two fronts. And again, I think the other teams they'll be fighting, Ferrari and Red Bull, have got a stronger lineup to do that with. I don't want to over-egg Hadjar in this sense, but obviously with Verstappen, all he needs is a relatively competent second driver. And now that Hadjar's found his form with that chassis,
So a lot with Hadjar with Russell, it's not necessarily Hadjar's problem, it's been the car. So
mm,
now they're both kind of intertwining, that's a worry for
yeah,
McLaren.
once Hadjar cleans up his act, I think it's going to be a really really challenging time for a lot of the other drivers in that part of the field. And I think once both Red Bull drivers are scoring points on a really consistent basis, they're going to be shooting up through the standings. And you've only got to look at how much they climbed this weekend. Coming into the weekend, they were, let's see, Red Bull were fourth in Miami, but prior to that point, they were sixth coming out of Japan, which is sort of an all-time low for them, really. And yeah, jumped up two places. And you've got to look at where Hadjar's climbed up as well. From just one solid weekend, he was as low as 20th coming out of Australia, obviously, 11th in China, 12th in Japan, dropped as low as 13th in Miami. And now, while he's up to 12th in Canada, that points haul has done him a world of good and opened up a bit of a breathing room for him when it comes to the standings as well. So I think the pressure's off both of them and they can really start to perform.
I want to have a very bold prediction to say Hadjar finishes ahead of Norris in the standings from the end of the year. I don't know if that's doable, but that would be quite the comeback.
I can go and write that on our season-long predictions.
It's a bit of a Hail Mary, but I just think what a story that would be.
Or
Norris isn't winning the championship this year. I've already said this.
no, you put Lando Norris to finish seventh and Isaac Hadjar eighth, so you're not far out. But I might put that
Ah,
in. I
okay.
might
All
put
right.
it
Well,
in.
yeah, I was gonna say I'll have the extra bit of that. I
Yeah,
just think it'd be such a, the regulations maybe haven't changed things as much as we want them to, but it would be a statement in itself if previous year's world champion is outdone by a number of drivers, but also by a driver in only his second season and his first season at a top team.
yeah,
That would be, and on merit rather than anything. It's not like they suddenly inherited a caterer.
yeah. It's a really oh, I've just remembered I can cross Max Verstappen off the drivers who'll score podiums this year list because he's now stepped on the podium. And again, like we said, it's taken him until round five to do that somehow, which is absolutely baffling as a
Imagine
concept.
saying that to 2023 versions of yourselves.
It, you'd be wondering what the hell is going on.
Talking of things wondering where the hell they're going on, Alpine, they continue to be quite decent. Weirdly, Gasly qualifies in 14th, finishes in 8th. Colapinto qualifies in 10th. I think his main achievement was just getting into Q3. I don't think we expected him to get any further up the order than that, but then finishes in 6th, in part due to the McLarens helping him out a bit and Russell. But again, much like when he scored points for the first time in China, he positioned himself well. He did what we tell drivers in those teams to do, which is if you can't get into points necessarily on merit, at least be in the position to capitalize should the opportunity come your way. And I don't think I had another double points finish for Alpine being on my bingo card. Definitely not this soon after the last time. It's something that's going to have to be studied. Because as I say, it can't all just be down to McLaren. They had pace. Colapinto's outdone Gasly a couple of times in a row now, it feels like, and I'm curious as to what is happening there. It can't just be the new Mercedes engine going into that car. There's got to be something else going on, but I'm just not sure what yet. I'm going to have to go away and do some homework before Monaco.
I've spoken with some friends on the inside at Alpine, and they've got a huge aerodynamics package this season that's just revolutionary compared to what they've done before. Bear in mind, they've also got a brand new
They
sort of
did stuff before.
well, they didn't. This was half the problem. They've now got they've completely overhauled their engineering team in the aerodynamics department coming into this season as well, and they've done a lot of work. And obviously now they've got one of the more potent engine gearbox combinations on the grid,
Hmm.
but they've combined it with a chassis and aerodynamic setup that's actually tractable and drivable. And the turnaround of Colapinto's form is something miraculous indeed, considering this.
Again, we're not there at the end of the season yet, but it's intriguing
Yeah,
so far. It's showing potential that we're just not familiar with
yeah, I
with
mean
him.
this is one of his highest finishes to date. I think it's another personal best for him, P6. And also it, like it's not like he's scraping points. He's consistently across the weekend showed he's got the pace to be in that part of the field, which is the most baffling
Hmm.
part of it. And I think he's potentially found a bit of relief when it comes to sort of the driver market and sort of his place in Formula One, and that's taken a bit of pressure off his shoulders. So this could be his first full-time season in Formula One. It might be like his third season appearing in Formula One, but this will be his first full
Who does
season.
he think he is? Liam Lawson?
Yeah, he's doing very much the Liam Lawson thing of doing like 4 years in Formula One before actually getting a full-time seat at any one team. But no, it's the Alpine turnaround is one that absolutely fascinates me, and I'm really enjoying it because what it's doing is bringing yet another team to the top fight. And when you look at the teams that
Hmm.
scored 2 points finishes this weekend, Ferrari, Red Bull, Alpine,
And Alpine. It's not the three that we were expecting to be in that top 10.
yeah, you go, okay, fine, I guess. But again, if you told me that somewhere in October, November last year, I would have gone, I think you're having me on. But
Yeah,
anyway,
you'd be questioning a lot of things. If future news visiting past you at that point, there's a fight ensuing going, who are you really? What
yeah,
have you done?
yeah, if I go back in time, where are we now? We're 5 months in, 7 to 8 months, and say, by the way, Canada's now round five. Max Verstappen has only just scored his first podium, and at the Canadian Grand Prix, only three teams scored two double points finishes. One of them was Alpine. I would think you were lying off from another dimension. Um,
And it's all on merit.
yeah, it's all about
It's
this
not
is
just
one about
circumstance.
yeah. This was genuinely the fact that they've built a good car and both of their drivers are locked in. I think Pierre Gasly's finally sort of found comfort and a home where he's supposed to.
He's had a good bit of fun in this instance. I think we're talking about drivers who can drive around issues. Well, obviously that qualifying performance not great, but he still had to get up to eight. Sure, drivers retired in front of him, but he still had to make his way there and not go backwards, which we're used to Alpine going backwards.
Yeah,
Um, it's nice. It's nice to see Gasly getting the chance to show a bit of what he's capable of, because obviously we're not used to seeing him, you know, being able to
demonstrate.
show this on a proper scale. And he's another driver where I go, I don't know where I put him, but I'd love to see him somewhere for a season, just to see
Yeah.
is he capable of more. Obviously he came in with around the same time as Leclerc and Norris, and just before and all this sort of time. But another one of those drivers where he wants to win a world championship, and you just don't see it happening. But you just love to see where he ranks
Mm.
in amongst his closest peers in that sort of thing, along with Ocon, along with Leclerc. See where does he level out in comparison to them. Would he have stood a chance, or would he not?
Mm.
If he can get a Grand Prix win at Monza in challenging circumstances, what could he do if he had the car underneath him full time? We're probably never going to find out, but it's performances like that that make you just re-investigate that question a little bit.
Yeah, again, as much as this season has its faults, I don't want to detract from that. It is also a season that's now starting to show us some different sides to drivers we would have otherwise overlooked, and I think that's going to be something quite exciting as a broader fan of the sport.
Gives us something to talk about at least.
Yeah, it gives us so much more to sort of enjoy about the series is just sort of seeing all these other drivers come to the fore and you go, oh, that's quite exciting. I love that. Speaking of Racing Bulls, again, really mixed fortunes for them. In the Grand Prix, Liam Lawson qualified 12th, finished 7th. Again, a lot of overtaking to be done there and just clinging on for grim death. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't
Defended
an
for his
easy one.
life.
Yeah,
Such a stout defense to keep Gasly behind. You've got to respect it.
yeah.
I think he earned his spot a little while ago anyway, but I mean, last year was the year that it was, but I think he earned his spot in Formula One, and it's nice to see that after such a long time actually getting permanently into Formula One. And this is another one of those drives where you go, yeah, that was really nice. I just feel for Lindblad because he all weekend up to this point
And been
was on
on
it,
the money. Yeah.
and I
Points
would
and
have
sprint
loved to
race
see where
as
he
well.
could have. Yeah, exactly. I would have loved to see where he could have ended up, and then like Russell, nothing he could do about it. Car just doesn't want to do it, and we kind of had to talk about that aboard start because I feel like that wasn't handled in the best way to
No,
remove the car from the grid.
but
Why are we not opening a door to just push the car in?
I don't know if the Grand Prix circuit in Canada has the door to put things through. I think it's one of those weird ones that the I don't know how the teams
Feels
get.
like just such a weird oversight if
Yeah,
that is the case because they got to put all the stuff somewhere. They're not just hoofing it over and just tidying it up afterwards.
yeah, because unless the teams literally have to run back down the grid across and back up the pit lane with all their stuff, usually there is a door section that will swing through that
Well,
will
exactly.
let you
I'm
through.
sure I've seen one there before.
There has been
It has
approved
to be.
every other circuit. I know that certainly the likes of Silverstone have them. I know that most other major circuits do.
I was going to say we sit and kind of have that as a normal characteristic of any circuit because that's just how it's done.
In case you have
Uh,
to move a car
so
at the last minute. It's
for such circumstances as this, yeah, exactly. So it was. I mean, I didn't mind because it meant I could keep watching the Indy 500 to completion without having to concentrate too much on F1. But I'm also going, for all the reasons to delay the start, this is a mess. Sort this out.
yeah, it was clumsy from Formula One. But again, it's no fault of Lindblad. He'd qualified really well. His one lap pace was on it. This is his first time racing at this circuit, bear in mind, first time visiting Canada. So he's obviously done a lot of work in the sim, learning the lines, learning the braking zones, just getting a feel for what it's supposed to be. And then it's challenging conditions. It's colder, it's greasier than anticipated. And then come the Grand Prix, it would have been really interesting to see what he could have done because it was a challenging opening series of laps. Because it
He's a
was,
fierce racer as well. Like
yeah,
when he's in it, he's in it. We saw that in Australia
yeah.
immediately. So it's such a shame we couldn't see more of it.
It would have been really exciting to see that. But yeah, again, another one of those weekends where you go, oh, great, we've got to see something really interesting from Lawson and look forward to more of that as the season goes on. Meanwhile, two drivers we didn't actually see a lot from this weekend, apart from 1 point for Ollie Bearman. He qualifies 16th, finishes 10th in the Grand Prix. Ocon qualifies a place behind him, finishes 14th. Ocon had been struggling with setup all weekend long. I'd been following his story quite closely. I know through the practice sessions they had to adjust his ride height. He was unhappy with how low it was. And then obviously as you bring the car up, you lose the aerodynamics. So you didn't have the grip, he didn't have the tyre preservation. So the car just wasn't with him. He struggled to get the setup this weekend, which racing driver excuses. But yeah, on the other side of the garage, the problem with Ocon is when he has that duff weekend, it almost certainly is one of those weekends where Ollie Behrman just pulls out one of those sort of like quietly competent races, and you sort of have to go, ooh, it's a good thing that Lewis Hamilton reiterated he's staying in Ferrari for a bit longer.
Yeah, it's just a full weekend. It felt like opportunistic points. You got to be there to take it when the likes of McLaren squander it. But if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't really be talking about them at all this weekend. So it's just one of those things. I think the only saving grace that you have in this instance is that none of their elements went fundamentally wrong. It was just we need to improve rather than this is a massive issue. They didn't have problems in the same way that Aston Martin or Cadillac have. They don't have anything Mercedes inside them to worry about when they start seeing all the other issues going on with those cars. So it's half a dozen one, half a dozen the other, but I think it's one of those things where it's just a case of there's nothing fundamentally wrong. We just need to figure out how to make it all better.
Yeah, there's it's just one of those things where you want Haas to really be able to get up there and start scrapping with the likes of Racing Bulls.
For Henry's mental health, if nothing else.
Yeah, but also the problem you've got is Williams slowly finding form with their car and inching their drivers closer and closer to the points. They're at risk of overtaking Haas if you're a Haas fan, but if you're a Williams fan, it's great because you're like they might overtake Haas. This is great. This is what we're after, and it's sort of
I'd like Williams to overtake McLaren, but I think we're a bit far away from that still.
it. I wouldn't rule it out. It really depends on how badly McLaren's season starts to unfold because they can
I
keep,
want the 1990s to come back.
yeah, Williams finishing ahead of McLaren. It'll be really interesting. We'll have to give McLaren Peugeot engines again just to try and make that happen. Um, 1.9 HDI engines, that'll solve the problem. But yeah, for Haas, Duff one. Williams, meanwhile, sort of
Less stuff,
yeah, less Duff. I think it's because of the fact that they've come from a different starting point. It seems better than the otherwise.
different starting point, and also Albon, it wasn't his fault.
Yeah, we
He
didn't.
didn't choose to DNF.
Yeah, what he could have done. It would have been really exciting to see what he could have done. Yeah.
And it would have been nice to also see the accident when it happened, not
Mm.
10 hours later, as it felt like on the race broadcast. The race broadcast, I think this is the natural segue I'm going to have into that, was just all over the place, it felt like this weekend. There was a lot of announcements for investigations and penalties that we knew nothing about why they were being done in the first place. And then when they did show some of the replays, they had graphics covering various replay boxes to go, kind of need to see the whole thing to know what I'm looking at here. So otherwise, this we might as well just not show it at all. I don't know what was going on that front, but this was the most obvious example. You go, something's happened to Albon. We're told that Piastri's had a ding dong with him because we can also see Piastri falling down the order a bit as he goes into the pits to get a new nose, but we don't actually see the incident itself for what felt like at least another 10 minutes, which, when you've got instant replay, feels a bit counterintuitive.
Mm. It's such a weird one to sort of pick apart. And again, I think the broadcast this year has been dire, and it's all done in-house by Formula One these days, and then just supplied as a global feed. There's a lot that
I
needs,
wonder who's in charge,
yeah,
in other words.
they need to be doing better. I don't know whether it's the TV direction, whether it's the camera operators, whether it's the graphic coordinators. Something's missing from the broadcast this year. The thing that I absolutely love is the fact that on long straights, they no longer give you onboard shots and they do not give you the detail overlay on the halo where you can see like throttle and speed traces
Hmm.
because they know we will spot the super clipping. You can hear it every now and then when they forget to cut away towards the end of a long straight. So in Canada, you'd come out of the hairpin, you do that sort of bend
Hmm.
your left, get on it, and every now and then they'd forget to cut away from an onboard. They wouldn't have the graphics there, so you couldn't see the speed backing off,
But
but
if you
you'd
know
hear
what to
it.
listen out for,
You'd hear the electrical system kicking and going, we need more energy in the battery. And you'd hear it happen, and the driver's like, ah, great. So then you're no longer going fully on the brakes into the corner. You're no longer demanding the most in the brakes and the chassis. And it just takes the glimmer off of it. But yeah, you can tell why some bits of TV direction are being done the way they're being done. The rest of it is a bit bad. Williams overall, it's looking good. They're finding pace in the car. They're getting better. The car's gotten a bit lighter. It's a bit more agile. They just need to figure out a few more bits and pieces.
Albon needs to just get through a weekend cleanly. Car in a mess on Friday after hitting a groundhog, and then car in a mess on Sunday after Piastri, on behalf of the groundhogs, sees how he likes it and drives into him.
Mm.
And yeah, not much you can do about that. But Sainz was one of these drivers who just kind of snuck in there. Qualifies 15th, finishes ninth, and you kind of notice him towards the end of the race and go, wait, how have you got up there? Where did you come from? You're in a Williams. You're not going to be doing this well just yet, but fair play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's going to be funky to see how this plays out for them. Meanwhile, Audi. Hulkenberg qualified 11th, finished 12th. Bortoleto qualified 13th, finished 13th. Basically a new team. It's yeah,
There's not much to say. They won the fringes, which I think, you know, is all right. It's sort of where we expect them. We need a little bit more craziness for them to score points on this kind of an occasion. This was all merit based and just reliability. I think it was nice that they got both cars to start and finish because that's not obviously not happened at every race yet. But like you say, they're a new outfit in a lot of ways, and they're still trying to figure things out. So they learned a lot more than other teams will have, especially Cadillac and Aston Martin, who only had one driver each finish, and the circumstances under which those two drivers finished were dubious, let's say, considering how often they were going into the pits and how often they were pulling out of the way because they were being lapped for the 67th time. So I think at least Audi have got that much going for them where they don't need to worry about those kind of fundamental problems. They can just sort of keep doing what they were doing in preseason testing, which is just going about their business, and we'll get there. And in the meantime, we've got Freddie Slater in F3, focus on him, and we've got MFL, my F1 Academy, focus on her. She's doing very well. And then we'll catch up later with F1. Just focus on these two for a minute.
yeah, it's good for Audi at the moment because when you consider what they're up against, the fact they're so close to those points, it's sort of the same argument we've used with Williams. It's that sort of incremental gains. We're not expecting much from you, but just keep building on it weekend after weekend. And again, the pace really does seem to be in the car. And you look at where they're able to qualify, getting it close to the sort of in the top
Mm.
half of the grid. It's yeah, that next little bit I think is going to be really exciting for Audi. Similarly for Cadillac in some ways and less in others. Bottas qualified
That was
21st.
convincing.
But yeah, Bottas qualifies 21st, finishes 16th. Perez qualifies 20th. DNFs in a very amusing way when his suspension just sort of goes full Jaime Alguersuari and just goes, whoop.
Yeah, Lewis and Max watching that in the cool down room going, huh, they're both a bit bemused by it as well. Like, that's not meant to happen. Like, no, it's not. Perez also being very amusing. I don't know if you caught this with the sprint race. I was watching it the day after because we're not going to be watching a sprint race live, let's face it. And initially, Perez finished 11th, which would have been Cadillac's best result in any race so far this season. But because of the delay from when I was watching from when it happened, there was the update that had come from post race, and so you have the commentary going, "This is best result and Cadillac's best result of the year so far," followed immediately by, "He has a 10-second penalty and drops well into the position that he's in." And goes, and there you have it. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and there it was. It was just comedically excellent, but result-wise brutal. So obviously you weren't getting any points anyway, but now you're really not getting any points.
Mm. It wasn't going to last ultimately and annoyingly. Um, yeah, it's
Colton
just
Herta on the flip side, though, running in third for the feature race, plummets down towards the end to like 16th. I don't know what happened. I need to go and have a look properly. And then somehow, because of just F2 being F2, finishes in eighth. So he had a real yo-yo affair, and he's again a little bit like Phil minus later doing for Audi. He's going, look at me, guys. I'm the positive news story over here in the junior series. Let's focus on this good news story instead.
yeah, one of us is having a good time, probably mostly ish, sort of. It's up and down for Cadillac at the moment, but it's better than Aston Martin, who remain in last place. Alonso
You say
qualified.
this though, Aston Martin have the same thing that Cadillac and Audi do. They've got a driver in the feeder series who's doing all the heavy lifting for them.
Yeah, it's going to be another one of those seasons where we eventually figure out adding the F1 Academy points to it and seeing if it makes a difference.
It's
It can be a
going to
fun
make a hell of a
fight.
difference for these three.
Yeah, especially with was it Matilda Potts scoring her first win in Formula One Academy for
First podium and then first win, yeah.
Yeah, representing Aston Martin, doesn't she? Alonso
Hmm.
qualifies 19th and does not finish. Retires with, was it a hydraulic issue? I can't quite remember what removed him from the race. It was a seat failure, apparently, which
Yes,
is,
that was it. Which it
yeah,
had trouble with earlier in the weekend as well. So they had somehow had multiple seat failures, which seems just, on brand if you're in Goldfinger, but you're not. So don't emulate that part of Aston Martin's history. Emulate the bit that's meant to be learning how to do a Formula One car.
yeah, you don't anticipate an F1 seat to go ejecto seato, cuz that's not how they're
Hmm.
supposed to do it.
Well,
Uh,
that's what this red button on the steering wheel does.
yeah.
Who did that?
Hmm. Yeah, not sure that was supposed to happen. Meanwhile, Stroll qualifies 22nd, Plum last, and finishes 15th. He survived to the end, I suppose. Bearing in mind that one, two, three, four, five, six cars either retired or did not take the start of the race. Um, yeah, the only person who really got past was Valtteri Bottas, who started on Inters anyway and then sort of went through the pits several times to try and sort of work his way back into position. So hardly a crowning
less,
glory.
less, less of the achievement than you were making it out to be,
You
which
know,
it
this is
was.
the thing, I was trying to work towards it being very accurately not the accomplishment that it might have seemed to have been. Um, hmm, yeah, funky one for Lance Stroll at his home Grand Prix, but he finished.
Matilda Pats did well.
Yeah,
That's what I'll focus on. I was happy
well,
for it. I was writing a piece on F1 Academy earlier, and I was thinking, oh, I'm glad second season she's doing well. And then I thought, wait, second season, first season, completely forgot about Pina Houseman. I do apologise. So then I was even more impressed with Matilda Pats. Like, it's only your second full round in the series full time. Good
hmm,
on you. So yeah,
yeah.
positive Aston Martin story.
Positive Aston Martin story. And then from the positive Aston Martin story to some positives from the weekend and some negatives with winners and spinners. Timo, your winner, please.
I had a few options here, but I think I'll go with Lewis Hamilton just because he had a stellar weekend.
Yeah.
It's his best weekend with Ferrari so far. How could you not go for that? There are other options, but I just couldn't go any further than second place.
Yeah, same for me, really. I can't, I think we're going to agree on what we're picking for winners and spinners because it's such an obvious set of options for this weekend. I don't think anyone else had a better weekend of it than Lewis, other than the obvious Kimi Antonelli. He absolutely, once he wasn't fighting George Russell, just drove away from the field. But I mean,
Well,
that,
that's why I say I wouldn't necessarily even argue Antonelli would be a winner. I'd go, if anything, it'd be George because he was beating Antonelli soundly throughout the weekend. The only reason he didn't beat him as the Grand Prix was because of the car. Nothing he did. Antonelli, if anything, was on the back foot. He was not lucky to get the win in some ways, but fortunate.
yeah, Lady Luck was shining down upon him with good fate. Meanwhile, other side of that coin, spinners, we're both in agreement with this one as well. I mean, I think Arvid Lindblad summed it up best when he was doing the driver parade at the start. Someone asked him for sort of what his start process was going to be. He said, if it's dry, we start on the dry tires. If it's wet, we start on the wet tires. Everyone's like, cheers, Will Buxton. But clearly McLaren will have been.
Everyone except McLaren, it would have seemed.
So I think both of us agree that they are our spinners for this weekend.
Yeah, what a mess.
When there's so much on the table, especially with one of the championship sort of leading drivers ducking out, to then have both your drivers either stuck in the mire of 11th and DNFing. Bear in mind, I think McLaren make their own gearboxes. They don't buy the gearbox from Mercedes. I think they make their own on this chassis. I'll check, but I'm fairly certain that this year they run Mercedes power, but they run their own gearbox. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? McLaren, the MCL 40. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, the transmission is a McLaren one. So that's what let go and problems. Um, so yeah, problems for them and problems for us with neither of us scoring points for anything really. I was hoping they'd have
It's
done
quite frustrating. I had the drivers who finished in second and third predicted for first and
first and
second.
second.
So it
Yeah,
was very close,
yeah,
but ultimately for naught.
yeah. Yeah. I don't think we even got close. No, nothing, nothing at all.
No, we got
Um,
nothing at all.
I don't even. I didn't. I'm hoping they would have done like a compilation of Wall of Champions touches and taps, but
I
I
think the only ones that happened from memory were F2 was the proper smack in there, and I think we had a brush with Lewis or Charlotte in the sprint race. That's the
Yeah,
closest we got to anything, so we were quite overly ambitious on that one.
you certainly were with 7.
Yes.
Um, however, if I don't know if you saw like some of the pre-race bits and pieces with Williams, where Alex and Carlos took a golf buggy round and did like a lap of the circuit for Williams socials. They purposefully brushed the Wall of Champions with the golf buggy, which I thought was quite funny. But yeah, possibly the best lap they did across the weekend. Then it comes to Fantasy Formula One review, and I do have this open. Let's see.
I've once again neglected to change or even look at my team, so I don't think I've done particularly well. I suspect I have Russell in at least one of my teams, and I think that may have been my undoing.
I had Russell in a couple of mine as well. However, the highest scoring team this week was Malteser Racing, my team, 296 points. Um, Dushfall Racing, run by Niklas Tadros Ursat, 276 points, and Sibonius Racing, Sebastian Fritz, 273 points in third place. My podcast team, fifth, 196. My Jaffa Cake Racing team, 194 points. Champagne Macarons 2, ninth, 170 points. Pork Scratchings Racing, 10th, 158 points. That's one of mine. On the Curbs, one of yours, 158 points and tied 10th.
Oh, not
Um,
bad. Not
not
bad.
bad, not the worst. I did go in before the weekend and adjust the worst of all possible options team because we figured they were doing too well. They've now
Yes.
come last. They scored 50.
Excellent.
I
Who did you replace?
I can't remember who I replaced coming into the weekend, but we're now running Lance Stroll, Arvid Lindblad, Gabriel Bortoleto, Sergio Perez, and Kimi Antonelli with Cadillac and Aston Martin as the constructors.
You'll have swapped out amusingly Lando for Lindblad.
Yeah, I think I did. So I mean, he did
Harsh for
score.
Lindblad, but it
Arsenal Lindblad
worked in this
didn't score
instance because
anything.
he didn't
Yeah.
start. So it
Um,
swings and roundabouts.
Overall, Dutchfall team run by Nicolas Tadros Osat, 1,367 points, leads the championship as it stands. Sibonius Racing, run by Sebastian Fritz, 1,343 points in second. And I move up to third place with Jaffa Cake Racing, 1,125. And then I'm in eighth with my podcast team. Champagne Macarons 2 moves up to 10th, 883 points overall. Malteser Racing, 795 points, up to 14th this week. The Haas Plan, run by Henry Wallace, down to 16th, 770 points this week. On the Curbs, your team 743 in up to 18th, and Pork Scratchings goes down one place this weekend, 707 points overall. At the bottom, the worst of all possible options, 351 points. The team above it is on 536, so we've clearly nailed
Good,
running a
good,
bad
good.
team.
Excellent.
So something's going right for
We're,
us.
we're not quite Robert Percy from last season, but we're
No.
giving it a go.
Well, more accurately, we can pay attention to and keep swapping in worse and worse drivers. And if there's
True,
rumor of
true.
a driver
And
being
we don't have
unstopped,
any inactive drivers either,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's already by
yeah,
default an improvement.
we're not using the inactive driver cheat. Anyway, that's all we've got time for on this week's episode of the Undercut Podcast. We'll be back in just over a week's time to preview the Monaco Grand Prix, round 6, and we're finally making it to Europe in
Round
June.
six for Monaco doesn't sound bad. That
No,
weirdly
it
sounds
sounds about
acceptable.
right. Yeah, getting to Europe for round
Don't like
6.
how this is working.
We're getting
Feels
back.
like it's 2009 again.
Yeah.
Got 17 races.
Mm. Don't count your eggs and all that. Anyway, Timo, in the meantime, where can you be found?
This week on the Curves IndyCar 4, of course. We haven't recorded it yet, but it's going to be not a short episode, I am sure. An Indy 500 review. Once my co-host Nate has picked himself up off the floor, much like you, he is a big David Malukas fan, so I will need to go and check him out at the hospital. Uh, Aside from that, key takeaways from F1 Academy over on Paddock Chronicle, and another look back at the Indy 500 over on Paddock Influence on the Curbs for everything else.
Lovely stuff. And if you want more from me, you can find me writing for Classic Car Weekly. New issues come out every Wednesday. You can also find the Classic Car Weekly podcast online. We try and get an issue of that out every week. And you can just find me on social media as at Jesse on Cars on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back with a preview of the Monaco Grand Prix.